1965 in the pages of Ebony magazine, James Baldwin said the following, and he was referring specifically, of course, to those of us called white in this culture, but it was a statement really about this country in a broader sense as well. He said, people who imagine that history flatters them, as it does indeed since they wrote it, are impaled on their history like a butterfly on a pin, and they become incapable of seeing themselves or changing themselves or changing the world. This is where it seems to me, Baldwin continued, that most white Americans find themselves impaled. They are dimly or perhaps vividly aware that the history that they have fed themselves is mainly a lie, but they do not know how to be released from it, and they suffer enormously from the resulting personal incoherence. I think that I could pretty much drop the mic right now, having said very little out of my own mouth, referencing only the words of Baldwin, and have made the point that I came to make this evening, one that sums up in just a very few words the horror of American history and our inability to grapple with it and thus to understand what we face in the current moment. What Baldwin was saying, and my pedestrian interpretation of his lovely words, is that until white America is prepared to stare in the face those lies that we've told ourselves and others about our country, until we are prepared to grapple with what those lies have wrought and where they have brought us, we're not going to understand anything that we see currently happening. It becomes indecipherable. You can't understand the present without understanding the past. And yet, as he was noting, those called white in this country want so desperately to be released from that history. We see that all around us. Folks of color certainly know that among the more ubiquitous things you hear from folks called white in this country is this constant insistence that you must get over the past, that we have to move past the past, that we can't stay stuck in the past. This, I beg to remind you, coming from people who like to call themselves the Tea Party, which I believe is a rather old reference from the past, right? People who like to go to rallies wearing Revolutionary War costumes, powdered wigs, carrying muskets and "Don't tread on me" signs, telling black folks to get over the past. Now that is irony at its highest, right? Walking around with hats that say "Make America Great Again," again a reference to the past by definition, meaning what? That these are individuals that in fact quite love the past. Yeah. Love being stuck in the past so much they would like to be able to fashion a time machine that would allow them to go back to it. That's how much they love the past. See, we love the past as long as it is a past that venerates us as a people and makes us feel good, makes us feel that we're some unique and special people, the greatest country ever struck off from the forehead of God Almighty. As long as the past allows us to do that, we're good, see? That's what Independence Day celebrations are all about, after all, right? It's a really old thing, breaking away from the British. That wasn't like last Tuesday we did that. That was a minute ago, right? And yet every July 4th, we got these really patriotic folk want to set off fireworks in reference to a very old thing that happened. I don't really imagine any of us going up to the biggest patriotic guy in the Independence Day parade. Maybe you should try this, right? Maybe you should, on July 4th, go up to the July 4th parade in the community, whatever they have, and find the guy with the red, white, and blue on and the biggest "I Heart the USA" button on his hat. And just go up to him right when the Boy Scouts pass, when he's in a really good mood and he's had 7 hot dogs and 5 pieces of apple pie. And tap him on the shoulder and say, you know, this is all very nice. It's very nice. It's fun, right? It's good. Yeah, it's great. Can you just tell me one thing, though? When exactly are you going to get over it? Yeah. And I hope you have running shoes, because unless he's had those 5 pieces of apple pie, he'll probably set out after you. Right? Because you're not allowed to critique the past. You're only allowed to celebrate it. And what Baldwin was trying to tell us in that Ebony magazine article from 1965 was you can't be released from history unless you are prepared to confront it. You cannot be released from a history that you refuse to grapple with or even to understand or comprehend, because it will follow you from one generation to the next and the next and the next. And we were only given a partial truth in our grade school or maybe middle school science classes when the concept of inertia was explained to us, right? This idea that an object in motion will, as a general rule, remain in motion until it is stopped by some force of equal or greater power or weight, right? That's a physical property. It explains why a ball that rolls down a hill continues to roll. It explains why your car will roll when you don't put the brake on when you have it in neutral if it's on an incline, right? It explains that, but it also explains socioeconomic history. It explains cultural and political history, right? Inertia is not just a physical property. It's a socio-political, economic, and cultural property. That which happens in one generation affects the next and the next and the next. And so we have to be very clear about that. And I have always understood that as an analyst. I've always understood that as a scholar of sorts. I've understood it as an activist, but it was only fairly recently that I understood how important this was as a parent to understand. And why it's so important for us to be able to have a historical memory and a sociological imagination if we want to understand what's happened here in Flint, if we want to understand what's happened in Baltimore, if we want to understand what happened in Ferguson, if we want to understand what happened in New Orleans 11 years ago with Hurricane Katrina. You can't understand any of that in isolation, in a vacuum, right? And I was thinking about this as a parent about a year and a half ago.